Have the arrival of the very arrogant Prince of Aragon, who comes to choose a casket, and it is like a very quick scene. He comes, he chooses, he fails, he leaves. And the Prince of Aragon is very, if you remember from the play that we watched, he was very flamboyant and he was very like over the top. And in the play, in the actual reading of the play, he is a very arrogant man who will not jump with the multitude for gold, and he will not choose lead, because he says, "You shall be fairer you shall look fair ere I give or hazard," and that's scene 9, line 22. So he's saying Portia's not pretty enough to choose lead, like she's not pretty enough to hazard for everything. And then he chooses silver, because it's much as you deserve, and he believes he deserves Portia. And he opens it up, and of course he finds a fool's head, the portrait of a blinking idiot. So think of a blinking idiot like a court jester in that very funny hat. And he's very upset with this discovery, and he leaves immediately. Now, important thing about the Prince of Aragon is, with his arrival, we learn of the 3 rules with the casket test, and that was on page 85, lines 9 through 15. The 3 rules were: they may never tell anybody what casket they choose, they may never woo a lady in way of marriage, and they must immediately leave. So Morocco tells us the riddle on top of each casket. Aragon provides us with the rules of the test, and then of course when Bassanio comes, he's the final one, so we know which casket Portia is actually in, and so does Portia, which is a very important part, because now she can cheat and she can go against the theme of filial piety in order to win on her own Bassanio, the man she really wants to marry. And then in that's pretty much the end of Act 2, Scene 9. And then we go to Act 3, Scene 1. And Act 3, Scene 1 contains one of the most famous speeches of the entire play. And that is the speech given by Shylock. And it begins on page 97 with line 52. Whenever Salanio and Salarino have been talking about Antonio losing a ship, and then they come upon Shylock, and they're talking about Shylock exacting the bond and taking that pound of flesh, and they're like, "What use could it be of you?" And he starts by saying, "To bait fish withal." But then it turns into something much more, and it turns into this comparison between Shylock and a Christian. Like, it's the comparison saying, "I'm still a man. Okay, I'm Jewish, yes, but I bleed. I can be hurt." It's like this great, wonderful equality speech, and we'll spend more time on that directly in class, but that is one of the more famous speeches of this act to pay attention to, and I will give you more on that in class, but just to make you aware of how valuable that speech is from Shylock. And Shylock also provides us with information about his daughter. Tubal, another member of the Jewish community, comes and talks to Aunt Shylock about Jessica and the amounts of money she has spent that she stole from him. And amongst all of that wealth that she stole from her father was a ring. And this is one instance in the play where we see a different part of Shylock. And I told you at the beginning of this unit that there were 3 rings, not 2. And the 3rd ring belongs to Shylock, and it's from his wife Leah. And he puts a great value on that. And we're supposed to see that even though Shylock wants revenge on Antonio, he's still a man, he still had a wife, he still had a family, he still loved. There's another side to him that people don't necessarily see. And then that scene ends talking about exacting the revenge on Antonio with collecting his bond and going to bring the law into the situation. Now, along with all of this, we have the idea that this play is a comedy. And to us, we talked about this in class, it doesn't seem very comedic because of the ideas it presents. And so I've prepared some notes for you on comedy, and this is taken from a literary terms text, if you will. And a comedy basically has characters in it that are meant to put us at ease. Plays that are tragedies kind of have tension and a buildup of emotions and things like that, and there's death and there's destruction. But in a comedy, there are humorous characters. There are characters that are meant to give us enjoyable entertainment. They're not meant to worry us. We're not supposed to be afraid that somebody's going to die. And there are clowns and there are different class systems in the play with the characters, but in general, it plays up our happy emotions, like we're supposed to get a laugh out of everything. And then there are romantic comedies, and Shakespeare was very good at romantic comedies. In those romantic comedies, which Merchant of Venice has some qualities that belong with romantic comedy, it's the heroine that generally puts up a little bit more oomph in her dialogue and what she does than the man. And if you think about Portia, Portia's not our typical damsel in distress girl. She's smart. She has her wits about her. Yes, she has this filial piety thing going on, but she helps Bassanio cheat and choose the right casket. And at the end of the play, which we already know, she's going to save the day by cross-dressing as a boy and going to help Antonio in the courts. So that's part of being a romantic comedy. The heroine has a little bit more gusto than the men. And then the story ends with everybody getting married, happily ever after. And in a Shakespearean comedy, there is no death. There's no death. Nobody dies. They may come close to it, which classifies the play as a tragic comedy, but in a romantic comedy, there are usually weddings and feasts and happiness at the end of the play, not death, destruction like the tragedies. Now, as I just mentioned, there is something called a tragic comedy. Now, that does not seem like it goes together in any way, shape, or form. But in a tragic comedy, there is some tension, there is some negativity, and it seems like a trait of a tragic comedy is it seems like one of the characters is going to die or be near death experience. And in this case, that would be Antonio. However, it never happens. Like, other things to consider with comedy, I've mentioned just regular plain old comedy, romantic comedy, and tragic comedy. Something you have to remember, regardless of what type, there's cross-dressing, which was one of Shakespeare's, it's very common in Shakespearean plays. Jessica cross-dresses to run away with Lorenzo. Portia and Nerissa are going to cross-dress to help save Antonio. There's a lot of action going on towards the end of the play. It's more about Jessica getting to Portia's house and Portia going and rescuing Antonio. Things start to heat up quite a bit after Bassanio leaves Venice.